Good afternoon, everyone. I know many of you are finishing up eating. If you'd still like to get some dessert, please go ahead and do that. The table's over on the side, and that door also leads to restrooms if you need to take advantage of that. I want to introduce myself. I'm Steve Springer. I'm one of the partners with Stone, Rudolph, and Henry, and we want to thank you for being here today. Going to have some great information this afternoon about payroll, and it's called, I see all the P's there. Penalties, protection, and proper record keeping. And I think we're going to start with proper record keeping, aren't we? Because I think that kind of is the beginning of trying to keep things straight. But we're so pleased this afternoon to have our first speaker is going to be Andrew Merrill. Andrew is in our Client Accounting Services Department. Actually started here in Clarksville, but he's now in our Brentwood office, has been for a number of years. And also, we have representatives from Inova Payroll. We have Anna Stotts here today, as well as John Thompson sitting over here. And I think, Anna, you're going to be doing some speaking a little later on, or maybe both of you, I'm not sure. All right. Well, we are recording this session today, as we typically do with all of our seminars. And so I would ask this. If we want you to ask questions, but when you do, just kind of raise your hand and wait till someone hands you a microphone, because we want to be able to record your question and then let our folks who'll be listening to the seminar later on be able to hear both your question and the answers that are given. So just raise your hand when you have a question. Someone will bring a mic to you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Merrill, and you'll kick us off, right? All right.
Well, thank you guys for coming today. Like you said, I've been here in the Clarksville office, started as an intern. Stone, Rudolph, and Henry has 2 locations, so I started here in the Clarksville office, and I'm in the Brentwood office. It was founded in 1954. Provide a full service client accounting services, tax planning, audit, and technology side of it. Been around for over 60 years of experience. The office has been open, and we have over 40 plus staff at both locations. I joined Stone, Rudolph, and Henry in 2015. I'm part of the client accounting services. I also do tax, and I'm on the technology team as well, so I kind of cover a broad spectrum. I'm also a QuickBooks Certified Pro Advisor. I'm an advanced certified QuickBooks Online, which some people may have experience with, some people might not. A little mixed reaction there. I'm also certified with QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Enterprise. And I'm also certified with Bill.com. I don't know if any of you else are you guys familiar with that. But that helps with AP and AR. Kind of as an outsource, kind of gives a little bit more tracking, and that can be imported into QuickBooks as well. First, I wanted to go over some methods of record keeping. We used to do a lot of more paper records back then, and that used to take a lot more space. I remember in some of these back closets at our office, we just have filing cabinets full. And if you need to find something, you got to dig through all of that stuff. With time, we're kind of going more into the digital realm. Also, with keeping that in mind, is I don't know if you guys keep receipts when you go shopping, keep them for your tax return. Those fade over time. Even if they're in an envelope, by the way, next thing you pull it out, you can't read anything anymore. So it's kind of important to kind of go more into the digital side of it, so it doesn't fade over time, especially with tax returns. If you get audits, you got to show proof of that kind of stuff. With digital record keeping, you now have scanning. You can take pictures, go into PDF, and that can kind of take some space on hard drives. We're trying to get those compressed as well. The other side to that is a lot of people just keep it either on one computer or they'll put it on a portable hard drive. And then what happens is the computer crashes or that portable hard drive crashes, you've lost everything. So it's kind of important to keep it in multiple places. Make sure to do backups and all of that. One of the other sides that is going in there is cloud storage. There's lots of cloud out there. You have OneDrive, you have Google, you have iCloud. One thing you need to take in consideration if you're going to start doing that is security. With technology, everyone's trying to hack into everything, so you need to make sure you're doing it into the proper areas. One of those things you can look at is Microsoft has OneDrive, and then it has OneDrive for Business. One of the big differences is OneDrive for Business is HIPAA compliant with the government for like medical records. So if you're just using OneDrive, it's not secure like OneDrive for Business is. So those are things to take into consideration with. The other thing to look into is back then they used to write everything down in ledgers when they were doing all their bookkeeping. Now it's all going into the digital. Reason we want to kind of bring this up is when we get tax returns, when we get the files in, a lot of people will handwrite it down on a sheet of paper. It works, but at the same time, it takes us a little bit longer because we're having to convert it, do a lot of digital, make sure everything's calculating the way it needs to. Is different programs you can use, Excel and QuickBooks. You can use QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, as well as use Bill.com. And one of the nice things with Bill.com is it kind of outsources, but you can kind of have a workflow and for audit, do audit trails and can do all that. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up with this is the side of SRH has a technology side to it, and the gentlemen back there are part of the team, and I help with it. What they do for some of the businesses is they can go into businesses, kind of check out your computers, your network system, and kind of help either build it or upgrade it as needed. They also have monitoring services that can try to track before the equipment goes down, so they can transfer it over so you're not downtime. So that's all kind of part of proper record keeping, making sure it's there. Example of this is I have a client in Mississippi, and they have a business that uses POS for QuickBooks. They had it all on one computer. That computer went down. They lost everything. There were no backups of QuickBooks files, and they ended up having to shift over to QuickBooks Online so they wouldn't lose it, but everything kind of had to be rebuilt from scratch. So those are kind of things to look at. Technology is one of those things we kind of think back last. It's like, well, do I want to put money into the backup or anything like that? Nowadays with digital, if you're offline for just a few hours, you've lost a lot. In fact, I was at Costco this last weekend, the new iPhone launch. Their whole network was offline for that launch. And if you wanted to buy something, they had to do handwritten receipts to take to the register to buy the phone, call the phone company, be on hold for 45 minutes, and do it all through the phone instead of the 5 minutes on there. So those are just things to take into consideration. If you're interested, I have their information here. One thing I did want to point out, their website's srh.technology. There's no .com. A couple years ago, they freed all that up and have all these new URLs you can use. Next thing I wanted to go into is file retention. I'm going to go over through some of this stuff. It's listed out here for you. Federal tax records, you want to keep the last 7 years of tax returns. Now, the way IRS normally will do it is if they do an audit, usually they'll only go back 3 years. But if they find something, they can go back another 3 years. So we recommend kind of keeping around 7 years of tax returns. Now, that's one of the nice things for digital. If you keep a digital copy of it, you have them, doesn't take a whole lot of storage. And then also, if banks are asking for them for all your loans, you don't have to keep calling and asking for a copy. You have a digital copy at all times you can use and send to different people. With that, don't forget the support docs that make up that tax return. If you do a lot of meals and entertainment, travel, the IRS, when they do not, they want to see records of that. So those have to be kept as well. If we do tax returns, we keep all scanned copies of all those support docs that we use for tax returns. And our firm policy is we keep records for 8 years. Same thing with state tax records. We want to kind of keep that in line with the federal. Same with 7 years there. If you have any loans, paperwork that you get from the bank, want to keep those for the life of the loan. You want to keep a copy of those. And sometimes it's good to keep it for the same time as like with the tax return if there's anything with that. Accounting records as well as 7 years. QuickBooks, what we try to do is keep those. Don't just say after the year, delete it, start a new QuickBooks file and go from there. You want to keep all those back records. Business startup records. These are kind of like your IRS SS4, which has your EIN number. If you apply online, the IRS shows it to you on the screen. You can print it out, and they will send a letter. And that's the only letter they'll send. If you need it for anything, it's a little bit of hassle to contact the IRS and get a duplicate sent out. It can take about a month or so to get that. So it's always important to keep a permanent copy of that, as well as any state registrations, exemptions, state resale certificates, and business licenses. One thing that's nice, if any of you guys have sales tax in that, is Tennessee switched over to 10-tap recently, and they can send all those letters digitally and keep them on there if you need it. The few times I've called, they'll send it out, and next thing I know, I can reprint whatever I need off the 10-tap. So that's one of the things that kind of saves having to call the state. One thing to come here is employee records, and then payroll records. So with this is 1 year after the employee's gone, you want to keep all employee records. Any type of notes or anything, if they got dismissed, you want to keep those for up to 1 year after they left. Payroll records you want to keep for the last 3 years at a time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. Next thing I wanted to cover is Excel. Definitely recommend using Excel if you have a lot of things you're keeping track of, need to do a lot of calculations. With that, we just wanted to point out a couple things. Microsoft has a lot of free templates out there that you can use for different tracks. You can do time cards, they have budgets, they have some for business. There's a URL here, and that will take you to the website for Microsoft. You can download, those are all free. Or if you open up Excel right at the top, there's a search box and it'll start showing you a bunch of different templates. The reason we recommend some of these templates is they have formulas in them. And sometimes, this even happens to us sometimes. We're punching in a bunch of keys and we hit the wrong number and then our total's off. In Excel, they have an auto calculation formula and it auto calculates for you, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. So those are some of the things we want to mention. And sometimes when we do this, we want to mark the different cells in a different color so we know not to delete them. And there are ways in Excel to show formulas, as you kind of see in the slides. It will take you to Formula tab, Show Formulas. That way you can see if a formula was overridden. Because sometimes what will happen, we have this with clients, they have a sales tax form that they do, and they accidentally overrode one of the formulas. And they're calculating, they're wondering why it's not matching what 10-tap is saying they owe. It's because one of those features got overridden. So that's what we do. We always use blue text to indicate this is a cell that we have as a formula. With that being said, as a small business, we recommend using an accounting software. We recommend QuickBooks. Excel works, but it can't give you everything you need, give you the reports that you need to pull. Sometimes it takes a while to create all that stuff, so we do recommend doing QuickBooks, and with that also doing your bank reconciliations. But even if you use Excel, you got to remember to do bank reconciliations for your business and personal when you get the things together. Part of that being said is sometimes you've written a check, it's never cleared. On our policy is if a check hasn't cleared after 6 months, we have to reverse that expense back out. So those are the kind of things that you're looking for. Also, when you reconcile, you might have missed certain expenses that you can claim as a business. Also, try to keep business and personal expenses separate. You don't want to mix both of those up. Doing the proper record keeping, getting templates and all that stuff, when you send it to us to especially do tax returns, anything like that, it's easier and quicker for us to do things for you. So quicker turnaround, we're not having to go through a bunch of stuff. Next thing is QuickBooks Desktop. I wanted to cover a few things on here. A bunch of you guys using QuickBooks already, or okay. With QuickBooks Desktop, when you purchase the software, you have it on your computer, and then you can send us backup copies. You can send an accountant's copy. Are any of you guys familiar with accountant's copies? Okay. For those that aren't, what you can do with QuickBooks is, let's say you have your QuickBooks file, you're doing all your accounting, and then you need to send it to us to do the tax return. Well, you still need to keep using QuickBooks to keep your business going. With an accountant's copy, you can create an accountant's file to send us with a dividing date saying anything after this date, they can work in anything going forward, I can keep doing my business. And so that's one of the nice things about Desktop is you can send us a file, we can make changes to it. we can send it back to you and you can upload those changes. So everything's current. Because a lot of times what happens is we get a backup file, we need to make changes for the tax return, do depreciation, things like that. And then since it's backup, we can't quite send it to you. So the next year when we get the QuickBooks file, we have to re-put in those changes to the QuickBooks file and go forward. So it takes a little bit more work. With that said, we can also send journal entries directly to you to import. One thing I wanted to mention is QuickBooks Desktop for Mac. There are a bunch of Mac users out here. No, I'm running across a lot more of them in Nashville. They're really starting to like Mac. Intuit released QuickBooks for Mac 19 about a month ago, which kind of came to a surprise to us because they told us they weren't going to be doing that anymore. They're pushing everyone to QuickBooks Online. But with that, if you do have Mac, that doesn't allow for the accounts copy. Those have to actually have backup files, exporting it to a Windows device. So there's a lot more to it. If you guys do run into that, let us know. We have a bunch of instructions we can send out to help do all that stuff. So I had a client that had QuickBooks for Mac. It took us 3 times to get the file correctly to us. So it can take a little bit of time. But like I said, if you have questions, just let us know and we can send them out. You can connect bank and credit card feeds into QuickBooks Desktop, and you can import them. Where this can come into handy is it helps save time doing some transactions. You bring in the file, you just go through each transaction saying what it is, and then can send it into QuickBooks. If you've already recorded checks in QuickBooks, what it does is bring it in, you can match it to the checks and the different transactions, so you can just make bank reconciliations go a lot quicker. And one of the things I have noticed is a lot of people in QuickBooks has their bank account checking savings, but when it comes to their credit cards, what they'll do is when they pay the credit card is they record the expense at that time. You can do the same thing you do for the bank that you can in QuickBooks. You can have a separate credit card account, record all the transactions individually. When you make the payment from the bank, record it to the credit card account and reconcile it that way. It makes reconciling those credit card accounts a lot easier, especially if you're not paying the credit card off completely each month. Also with QuickBooks, if you do estimates or invoicing in there, AR and AP, you can create estimates and convert them to invoices automatically, so you don't have to recreate those as well. Also, when it comes to QuickBooks Payroll, there's a couple different ones out there. So you have QuickBooks Payroll for the desktop, and with that, we want to also kind of put out reminders. So there's a there's a fee to have QuickBooks Payroll, and then you have to pay it per employee. If you have more than one state, there's additional fees for each state for the different employees. When you have QuickBooks Payroll on the desktop, you're going to be recording hours. You can do direct deposit and checks, but you're also going to be responsible for calling the IRS or logging into EFTPS to make those 941 deposits, and you need to make them on time. Now, QuickBooks will give you due dates, but if QuickBooks isn't set up right to show you the proper due dates, that can throw it off. And I will say the IRS likes their penalties and interest when you are late. They are by the day. And so those can calculate fairly quickly. And it's all based by the amount that's due, not just a flat rate. So it can kind of build up kind of quickly. So those are things to take in consideration. That's one of the reasons we recommend going to like a payroll provider like Inova. They'll take care of all of that. When you have the QuickBooks Desktop, you also have to file the 941s, 940s, and all those forms, the state forms as well. Any questions on QuickBooks Desktop or anything? Okay, next thing I wanted to do is QuickBooks Online. A lot of mixed reactions with this. We're seeing a lot more QuickBooks Online in Nashville area, a little bit more. And we have over 100 clients using QuickBooks Online right now. There's a couple benefits to this. It allows you to connect up to 2 accountants. So they can be in your QuickBooks file at the exact same time you are, making real-time changes, and you don't have to send a file back and forth at all. Where this comes in is I do the monthly bookkeeping, the owner just logs in and pulls the reports as he needs to as soon as they're ready, different things like that. I get calls on how to do certain things. I can log in, see exactly what they're doing, and just walk them through. So that's one of the biggest benefits. And like I said, you can be in there real time. No one has to be out of it just to see what it is. It is cloud-based, so you do need internet. I was out, this won't work for everybody because I've been there where internet's kind of spotty. It won't quite work for you, but that's going to be one of the things. And because it's cloud-based, it automatically backs up on their servers. You can upload desktop to online, or you can actually, if you don't want online, you can download your file off of online and get it back into the desktop. One of the things that does come up is it is a service fee. A lot of businesses are going to that, so there's a monthly fee involved with that. If that is something that you guys are considering, just reach out to somebody that works here. There's certain discounts that we can get for you guys that you can't get outside of a firm. One of the nice things with this is it's the same. It uses a browser, so it's the same for both Mac and PC users. I don't know if any of you have seen QuickBooks for Mac versus QuickBooks for Windows. Completely different view, and some of the stuff you can't do everything in both of them. It doesn't quite work for that way, so it works here. You can connect your bank and credit card fees. It actually works a little bit smoother in this version. And you can pretty much do the exact same stuff that you can do in desktop on that. One of the things that they do have as well is QuickBooks likes to say, here's the software. We don't do everything perfect. We don't make all the right software. It might not be for you. We now have apps. And they have apps that go through all of their tests and everything saying, these people do sales better. These people can do inventory. You can get those apps, and they sync with QuickBooks. So if you have a POS system or anything like that, you just get their app, and it can pull all that information into QuickBooks online. And that's what they're trying to go with. Where this is happening with Bill.com, like I said, I have a client. We put in all their bills. They get processed, approved, and paid. It syncs with QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks automatically creates invoices or creates the bill, records the bill payment, everything all at once. So it's not having to be redundant. So that's what they're trying to do more with those apps. Next thing, just go into Bill.com real quick. This is where you can manage AP and AR. One of the clients I have, they want to have the proper control methods to where one person is not writing the bill, paying the bill. They want it to go through different people to get approved. This is where it can be. With Bill.com, what you would do is there's an email, fax, or app. You can take pictures. It puts in the actual copy of the invoice or bill, and then in there they can categorize what they want it to do, what account it's for, if they need to split it between different classes. And this is where it all gets linked with QuickBooks. And what's nice is once you link, vendors will start showing up, customers will start showing up back and forth. So you just have to put them in once and it will show up. It goes to the next person, he approves them, then it comes back saying they're approved, go ahead and pay. It gets all drafted at once from the bank account, and Bill.com prints the checks or does the ACH transfers automatically. So no one in the business has to have checks. We don't have to have checks to print and then get signed. They've already been approved. So that's one of the things you can do here. And for accounts receivables, same, you can send invoices. And you can be a customer on Bill.com for free to pay for those. And ACH is cheaper than having to print checks, and you get that in a day or two versus a couple extra days for checks. Going back to the storage side of this is Bill.com has unlimited storage. So all your invoices are automatically becoming digital, and you can do it for the invoices and bills, or they also have a side that you can just put regular documents if you need to keep up there. You can attach them to vendors or not. So for the W-9s that you want to attach with those vendors, they can do it. And right now it's unlimited, and it syncs with QuickBooks. One of the things I did want to mention with QuickBooks Desktop and online is you can attach receipts and bills in QuickBooks. The problem with that is once you start doing that over and over again, that QuickBooks file is going to get big. And that QuickBooks file is going to really slow down. We have that with another one of our clients is all of a sudden they've been putting in there, and then it takes 2 minutes just to go from one page to the next in QuickBooks. So that's one of the reasons I don't recommend storing stuff in QuickBooks like that. The actual receipts is they can get big pretty quick and it will affect the response of QuickBooks. And then with the app, different users have roles, and each person has an app. And all the owner would have to do is once it's in there and he sees it, he can just swipe saying approved or declined, or write a note and send it back to somebody saying what's wrong with this. And then they can push it back to the owner and he can swipe approved. So it kind of makes it for the owner. They don't have to be in the office. They can just have their phone when it's ready. So that's one of the nice things for that one. Next thing I would just want to cover is some of the few services that we offer here at the firm. I know that we've gotten a lot of people in asking for some QuickBooks support. They aren't familiar with all the stuff that we can do. We can do write-up and financials. This can be monthly, quarter, semi-annually, or annually. And some of these will work for banks. Banks sometimes want financials monthly. Sometimes they want them quarterly. If you're getting a loan, sometimes we'll want a tax return and your last month's financials, last year's financials. We can do that. We do help with payroll services. We can do QuickBooks payroll, but like I said, we do recommend going through a payroll provider. It's just a lot more smooth transition. It's more cost effective. We also do business filings, sales and use tax, liquor tax, heavy vehicle tax, city and county business tax. Do want to mention, this gets a little confusing sometimes for some people. City and county business tax is not a federal tax return, because we'll have clients get notices saying, I thought you filed my business tax return. These are completely separate. Tax preparer should talk to you about doing that kind of stuff if that's required, so that's one thing to bring up. Also, if you're starting a business, we can help register the business with the IRS and all the different state agencies as well. And we can do the tangible personal properties each year, 1099s and W-2. The other thing we do is training. So we can do QuickBooks setup and training. We can do training for desktop and online. We can go out to your business location to do the training. We can do it in-house. And then sometimes we can do it virtually. So we can remote in, have you watch what we're doing on the screen and things like that. And we also do that with Bill.com setup and training. Those are just a few, a handful more, and we can get a little bit more specific. All depends on your business needs that you may have. Also, besides client accounting services, we have tax, audit, compilations, reviewed financials. Those are a lot more for the construction businesses that are getting their construction contractor's license. They'll require those from a financial firm. Last thing I wanted to mention is a new service that we're going to be coming out with. Payroll deposit verification. One of the things that happens as an employer is you have to make those 941 deposits, whether it's monthly or semi-weekly or monthly. And a lot of times what happens is, we're seeing this with some of the small payroll providers. They'll go ahead and deduct your bank account, but it doesn't go to the IRS. And one of the things that can happen is you are still liable to the IRS for that, even if that payroll provider didn't put it in. So one of the services that we're offering is a check that we can go in and make sure those deposits are being posted to the IRS. Now, with that being said, if you're a client and you're also an Inova payroll provider, we're not worried. So we are providing this service for free if you're an Inova payroll as well as a client. But this is one of the things that we have seen kind of happening a little bit more recently. So we wanted to make that available to you. If you have 1 or 2 employees, it's small, but when you start getting 20 or 30 employees, that's a large size that can happen. If it doesn't get paid, the IRS is going to be coming for you. They're not going to go for that payroll. And then you can try to go for that payroll company, and it's a whole legal battle there. So this is just more of a permitted method. So, is there any questions?
Just a couple comments on some things you brought up. You talked early on about data security and also about backups. I cannot overemphasize how important those are.
we all would like to think that our systems will never crash and we're never going to be that company that loses all their data, but it's really not a matter of if it will happen, but when it happens, because computers do crash and we often have no control over that. So I just want to stress how important the backups are. And if you don't have backup systems in place, our tech guys can certainly help you set those up. But also the whole issue of data security, what we hear more and more from clients is identity theft issues of employees, the company itself. And so just being able to protect all that sensitive data, and we're talking about payroll, think about what's out there. There are the employees' names, their addresses, their birth dates, their social security numbers, their hire dates. And what could someone who has bad intent, what could they do with that? Go out and open a credit card using your name, go out and take out a loan using your name. There's all kinds of things that could happen. Maybe access your bank account information or your bank account, because your bank account information is there for direct deposit. So if you're doing your own payroll and you've got these things in place, be sure you have proper security and controls over all that information. A year or so, maybe a couple years ago now, the state of Tennessee came out with a new law that deals with what happens if that information gets accessed by a third party who's not illegally. And so there's certain things you as a business have to do at that point, including notifications to employees and vendors and other folks whose information may have been accessed. It can be very embarrassing, first of all, but also very costly to you as a company should that happen. And then there's always the penalties from the state of Tennessee if you don't comply with that. So those were some great points. I just wanted to add that.
Any other questions? Last thing I want to mention, Steve reminded me, with that security, we use ShareFile, and we have a portal for sending us information digitally, and highly recommend using that. If you're not sure how to get to that, let tax preparer contact one of us, because that's a way to send email securely to us with that sensitive information. I have a bunch of people that like to send me stuff straight in an email. And that stuff is not on our server, it's out there, and anyone can get into it. So, and then like if you're using a free Hotmail, Gmail, it's out there in your inbox or your sent box, and so it's out there to get. So we do recommend using those methods to get us stuff, especially if you start going more digitally and having digital copies sent. Definitely let us know, and we can get that stuff to you so you can send it to us. If you guys have no more questions, I'm going to hand it over to Anna.
Good afternoon. I was going to start out with like some jokes or stories, but then I found out I was going to be recorded, and so I work for an HR company, so they probably don't want me doing that. So I shared them at the table over here with my friends. So sorry you didn't get to eat with me. I'm with Innova Payroll, and we are excited to be here. We appreciate the invite from Stone, Ralph, and Henry, who are a wonderful partner. I have been with Innova about 15 months, but have been in the HR and payroll world about 13 years, shockingly. I didn't even mean to end up in this industry. I went on an interview at a company called Century 2, thinking I was interviewing for real estate at Century 21, and then I got into the lobby and I saw the logo. I was like, I have no idea where I am, and so I started reading some of the brochures in the waiting area, and I'm like, okay, this is something about HR, and I'm like, I'm 22, I really have no idea why that's important or what they're even talking about, so I've got to figure out how to get this job. And so I'm interviewing with the president of the company to be her assistant. And so I go into the meeting, I guess I am telling a story. I go into the meeting and I'm thinking, how am I going to turn this to where I'm having her tell me what they do? And so I'm like, tell me about, how did you start this company? What happened in your life that said, this is what I need to do? And she just started telling me about helping small businesses and how that was just really, she had watched her father had a small business, her grandfather, and just everything that they dealt with that she didn't want, people that in her circle to have to deal with. And so she wanted to put a team together to really come out and help the businesses that really have created America. And so then she just goes on to tell me all this stuff. I'm like, that's really cool. And so after that, somehow I ended up getting the job and became her assistant at this HR company, and really just started meeting everyone in the company and learning what they did and what they did individually to help a small business. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this industry. Never imagined it. I went to school for social work. So sometimes I feel like I'm doing that by managing people, but that's how I ended up here. And I've worked at several other larger payroll companies. that were great companies. And I didn't leave because there was anything that they necessarily did to cause me to leave. But I realized that I wanted to be able to steer the ship a little bit, right? If a client had issues or concerns or something that where they didn't fit into a box, I wanted to be able to go to the head of the company and say, this client needs this. What can we do to accomplish that? And with Inova, that's really been my experience. We look at each client individually and what they need, and we're not afraid to go meet with someone and say, you may not be the best fit for us, or what you're doing is actually working. But now that you know what we do, if you start feeling the heat, then let's talk again. So we're always going to be very consultative and make sure that you or anyone that you refer to us, that they're taken care of and they feel like they're important to Inova, like they're not just a number. So long story to say, this is how I'm here. Somehow gotten chosen to speak. But, you know, my year with Inova has been wonderful, and my experience with Stoner up and Henry has been really great so far. So I appreciate it. I'll get into the really fun stuff now. Okay. We're going to go over some top payroll mistakes that all small businesses say they don't make, but a large percentage do. Some myths around outsourcing your payroll that we definitely want to overcome. And then if you're choosing to go the route of choosing a service provider, these are just questions and things that you can ask to make sure you're finding someone that's the best fit for you, because there are companies that end up being a better fit depending on your size, what your needs are, things like that. Okay, so payroll mistakes are actually very costly. There are a lot of penalties that are assessed each year, as Andrew was saying. And a lot of companies think that they're never going to be the one that's audited. They're never going to be the one that has a penalty. But it will show that 33% of employers received some type of penalty last year. So I think that's a pretty high percentage. And it could be something as small as $100. It could be something, you know, $30,000 depending on the severity of the penalty. You know, 40% of small businesses averaged around the 800 mark. Small businesses are typically targeted because they're more likely to be making mistakes because they don't have the staff or support maybe for the oversight. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. So the number one thing that we see is maybe people's names being misspelled. Their social security number may be off by a number, or maybe their social security number is not valid. You know, maybe their pay is wrong. They're really supposed to be making $15 an hour, but somehow $12 an hour got put into QuickBooks or the payroll system, and that way you're underpaying employees. So it's really important to make sure that you're reviewing your data. Onboarding tools can give an employee a way to onboard themselves. Some people don't feel comfortable with that. I always say just double check it. You know, they're entering in their direct deposit information, their W-4 information, their social and all of that, and you're giving them the freedom to do that. But always make sure that you're going and checking behind them. And I think it's just a good rule of thumb that at least annually have people review their information. Have they moved? Has anything changed to where maybe when they first filled out their W-4 or their I-9 or whatever, it may not be the same now, and it would be something that you would need to update. There are verification tools. E-Verify is required in some states, not in all, but it's a great way to make sure that you're employing people that are legal to work in the U.S. Speaking of classification of employees, this is a big one. We get this question a lot. Is this person supposed to be a 1099 or a W-2 employee? And we see a lot of these mistakes happen in startups. They're just getting going. They don't really either don't know the difference, or they don't know what qualifies someone from one or the other. The IRS does provide actually a really good checklist. You can go on irs.gov and walk through the checklist of answering these questions. And if any of the answers are yes, then you know it needs to be a W-2 employee, not a 1099. Some of it falls on, you know, are you telling them where to be, what time, are they wearing your uniform, whose truck are they driving, you know, things like that. Do they carry their own insurances? All those things are things you need to keep in consideration. There has been a lot of talk around, okay, well, I've been paying people as a 1099 for years now, and maybe when they first started with you, maybe that was actually the right classification, but then over time, you brought them more under your wing, and now they have different responsibilities than they did from the beginning. But people are afraid to say, okay, I've been doing it wrong, because they're afraid the IRS is going to come crack down on them, and they're going to be paying, you know, tons of penalties for the past however many years they've been doing it wrong. But there has been, I guess the IRS is saying, hey, we're going to be nice this time, and we're going to give you a little bit of assistance. I think I may have put the website on here, but it's the Voluntary Classification Settlement Program. So it will actually give them a little bit of a buffer. They can pay only 10% of the taxes that they would have owed 100% of for a period of time. If you raise your hand and say, yes, I'm willing to convert these from a 1099 to a W-2, I realize they've been misclassified. So definitely go on the IRS website and read more about that. If you or someone you know thinks that their employees or 1099s may be misclassified, there's a way around it where you're not going to be just hammered. The IRS will appreciate the fact that you've recognized your mistake and are trying to correct it. We also have a blog post, which I'll get into later. You can go on our website. Blog posts come out once every month or two, and there's a great one on there about classification of 1099s and W-2s. So feel free to read that and let me know if you have any questions. So processing payroll late or inconsistent. So what happens a lot of times if someone is processing payroll in-house, or if you're using a payroll provider that has deadlines, is that a lot of times people are letting their employees dictate when payroll gets processed. Employees get into a habit of, well, I can turn my time sheet in at this time, and I'm so sorry, I know I didn't have it in time, and then all these things keep happening and creating a culture where people are not held to certain standards, which means you're missing the deadline in which you process payroll. So that could either mean that you've missed the deadline of being able to offer direct deposit, then you're having to cut live checks, then you're required to let people have time off to go cash these checks. And so it can require, a lot more time on your end. And then also the people that are prompt on getting their information in are probably really frustrated that they're never getting paid on time, or they're being punished because there are other delinquent employees in the company that aren't following the procedures and deadlines. And when people aren't getting paid when they're expecting it to be, the culture kind of goes down in an organization. Okay. Failure to record paper checks. So a lot of times we see that people want to do manual checks. For one reason or the other, it could be that you process payroll and you realize you forgot to pay someone, or you missed hours and you want to make sure they're getting that extra $10 per 10 hours for that payroll and they don't want to wait till next time. Or maybe you're cutting a bonus check or something like that would be outside of payroll. A lot of times those things are done and then they're just kind of sat to the side on the desk and then they aren't recorded. And then that's going to end up where you're either going to maybe have your bank accounts are not going to be balanced because there's going to be stuff that came out that's not recorded here. Maybe the pay in the manual check needed to be taxed. And so then you've paid the employee and maybe you've deducted the taxes from them, but you've never recorded it. So then that tax money never gets sent to the IRS, the state. So it just can cause a snowball effect. So make sure if you are cutting any manual checks, they're outside your normal payroll process, that you are immediately recording them or have a date and time each week that you know this is when I'm going and entering this information in. Any questions so far? Okay. Treating payroll as a back burner function. So a lot of times they'll have someone in an organization, especially in a small business, where they're wearing many hats. It could be the owner of a company that is in charge of payroll, and that person all of a sudden becomes HR, and then they're the benefits person. And the next thing you know, you aren't running your company anymore, you're covered up in paperwork and you're not doing the things that are revenue generating. So you really do need to make sure that payroll doesn't become a back burner function, that it's not something that just we'll get to when we get to it, or we'll deposit our taxes when we can. Like, it really has to be something that's made top priority. So make sure you have someone in your organization that may not be their only job, but that it's a good chunk of their job is making sure that whatever their pay frequency is, if it's weekly, bi-weekly, they've dedicated time to where they're going to be spending, making sure that it's correct. The same goes if you're using an outsourced company. We're still going to need your assistance with the payroll. We can't control what happens in your organization, who's working when, where. So there's information that we're going to need. And if it's not on your schedule to make sure you get it to us, then it has the same effect. Anything else? It goes back to the whole payroll is a back burner function and employees aren't getting paid correctly. No one's going to be happy, and you're probably not going to have many people working for you. Time and attendance. This is a huge one. I think a lot of times we talk to people and they're like, well, I just have my employees fill out a timesheet. So they'll just write, but then all the timesheets I see say like 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm like, so you're saying that these people got to work right at 8 and they left right at 5, and you're just letting them hand you this handwritten timesheet, and that's what you're paying them on? Like, yes, sure, okay. So I think people are afraid to put in a time and attendance system because they're going to upset their employees. And then that's just a bigger issue because clearly you don't have control of your company, if that's your biggest concern, you should want, this benefits an employee more than it hurts an employee. So you can put in rounding rules that there's 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after. You can make sure that people aren't buddy punching. That's a big thing, is that people will be like, hey, clock me in, or so they'll give my codes 2434. And so someone will come in, clock them in, and that employee may not come for 10 or 15 minutes and they're late, and you're paying them for 10 to 15 minutes of work that they didn't do. It can also affect your bottom line, because whatever they're supposed to be doing within that time, that didn't get done, right? Which is sometimes revenue generating, and you're paying for extra time that they didn't work. Also, if someone's being clocked in and it's showing that I, Anna, am at work, but then something happens to me while I'm not at work, if it looks like I am, you have a lawsuit on your hands, because that employee's really not there, but it's showing that they were under your supervision during that time, that maybe an injury happened or some sort of criminal activity. I mean, you want to think the best of everyone, but your company is only as good as your worst employee. So you have to always look at it like that. You have to put things in place that may not really matter to the majority, but it's the minority that you really have to worry about, because that can affect the entire company. You will notice at the end of the year, if you put a time and attendance system together, how much money you may be saving money because you're overpaying, but really it's just the documentation of who worked when and where. Also for scheduling purposes, depending on what industry you're in, you can use a lot of these tools to make sure you're fully staffed. If you're a medical practice, and you want to make sure that you have enough people covering certain shifts. So that's also an advantage of having something like that in place. Any questions? Okay. Late or incorrect tax deposits. I know that Andrew mentioned this a little bit before. The IRS, their job is to find people that are not doing it correctly, right? So if you think that you can just continually deposit your taxes late, it will catch up to you. There is a statistic, and I'll have to remember where I read it, but I liked it, so I'm going to use it, that you're 70% less likely to ever be audited if you are processing your payroll through an outsourced company that the IRS recognizes. So if the IRS sees that your tax deposits are coming in from a reputable payroll company, they're at least going to trust that you are trying to do it right. You're putting things in place to make sure that your taxes are being deposited, that your quarterly and annual filings are being done. They want to target the people that they see are doing it themselves, that are a day late here, a day late there, because they know there's a higher likelihood that if that's happening, there's probably other things that are happening as well that they can assess penalties on. So using a payroll provider, or making sure whatever you have in place is up to date and that you put it on your calendar and you're sticking to it. Failure to update your unemployment rate. So your unemployment rate is the only controllable tax rate that you have. Other than that, the IRS says, here's your tax rate. You could be a great employer, you can be compliant, doesn't matter. Unemployment rate you can control. So as a business owner or an employee, you really want to be looking out to make sure that the least amount of money is going out as possible. The new business rate in Tennessee is 2.7%. So when you start a new business, unless you have a construction company or something that could be higher risk where they may assess a higher rate, you're going to get 2.7 as your rate. You're going to pay 2.7% on the first 7,000 wages of every employee in your company. That's for 2018. 2017 was 8,000. They dropped it down to 7,000 this year. This means, let's say I started working in January and I hit 7,000 in wages. My company paid 2.7%, if that's the unemployment rate, on me. Let's say I decided to leave the company, or I got let go and they had to rehire for my position. That starts over. Then the company's paying 2.7% on that employee, 7,000. So the turnover is going to cause this rate to go up if someone files a claim and they get awarded that, or you're just continuing to pay over and over when you've capped out on your current employees. So if you're assessed 2.7 at the beginning, but you don't have unemployment claims and your turnover is really low, you could end up with a 0.3 unemployment rate. And that's a big difference depending on the amount of employees that you have and how much turnover you have. Now, if you have a lot of turnover and people are getting unemployment, your rate could be 4.5%. And again, that's a lot on 7,000 for each time someone starts over at a company. So that's just something to really keep in mind. If you're using QuickBooks, or you're doing your payroll a different way, or if you're using a service provider, if you get a notice in the mail from the state, please always update your rate. They send them quarterly. Update it. Even a couple percentage points can make a big deal, and so you just need to make sure you're relaying that information, because if one quarter goes by with the wrong rate, it's just a snowball effect of things having to be cleaned up. Any questions on that? So this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about payroll being a backburner function, assigning an inexperienced person to handle it. You want to make sure that whoever's handling payroll in your company is a trustworthy employee. Obviously, there's risk of embezzlement if they're the ones that are controlling the money movement between employee accounts, company bank accounts, things like that. Using an outsourced payroll provider does help alleviate some of that risk of embezzlement. Paying people incorrectly and obviously tax deposits, if the person handling it is not trained to do that, they may not know that these things are as important as they are. Make sure they are highly trained. Have them work with someone at Inova, or if you're using another company, have that person make sure that they are fully trained and know how to operate the system. Like I said, if they're not using us, please also use someone that's all they do, right? Business owners wear 10, 12, 15 hats. They got in business for this reason, and this is all the stuff they have to do because they're in business. It's not the why they're in business. So just make sure that all the because things are actually getting done, and they're getting done by someone who's trained and knows the importance of them. Okay. Improper handling of garnishments or child support. So new hire reporting is very important. So in Tennessee, you have 20 days to report a new hire to the state. The reason this is so important is that when that employee is reported to the state that they work for you, that is going to trigger whether or not that employee has a garnishment. You will receive a notice from the state that says this employee that you hired has a garnishment. Garnishments, there could be, especially if they have multiple ones, there are ones that will go above a different one, and there's some that say, okay, take this percentage, then this percentage, and you can't take more than this percentage of someone's pay. So if that's not set up correctly and that employee's wages aren't garnished correctly, that falls back on you as the employer. So that's why it's so important that if someone works for you and you've received the notice that they have garnishments and you are not submitting that, you are also to blame. So new hire reporting is super important. We do that automatically for our clients, but if you're handling your payroll on your own, please make sure that's part of your process within 20 days of hiring a new employee. Okay. Failure to apply with the latest laws and regulations. There's always new laws changing, and it's not like they put a big newscast out and alert everyone in America that laws have changed. So it's really important to make sure that you're keeping up to date with these things. There are many journals you can read. There's blog posts, like I said, that we put out, that many people put out. It could be a change in a tax rate. So it could be things like that that are super important because you would need to know to go in to QuickBooks or whatever and make those tax changes. So it's just always important to make sure they're keeping up to date with all of those things. And again, if you use us or a reputable payroll company, we'll make sure that you're up to date with all the regulations and laws that have changed. Okay, so now I'm going to just get into a few payroll myths. Is there anything that you guys want to discuss or ask before I get into that? No? Everyone good? Okay. I've not even looked at my notes once. So if I missed something, I apologize, but hopefully this is informative. So myth number one is I don't have enough employees to outsource. We hear this all the time. I'm too small. Okay, well, the way I look at it, if you're a 400 employee company, you probably have a full-blown HR company or HR office. You probably have someone dedicated to payroll. You may have an in-house accounting department. So whereas we have many clients that are large and still use us for the liability to be back on us, the technology that we provide. But in the space I work in, I work with clients that have 1 to 50 employees. Most of those people are not going to have their own HR staff. They're not going to have a dedicated payroll team, in-house accounting, things like that. So as a small business, the way I look at it, you are a better fit for outsourcing. And I meant to print out, sometimes I'll take this to different places where I'd speak and have a little 2 things I would hold up. It's the amount of paperwork that's filed for a 5-employee company and the amount of paperwork that's filed for, say, a 40-employee company. It's not that different. Okay, your tax deposits may be more frequent based on how much tax money you have. If you're a small company with high wages, you could end up being the same frequency as someone with 40 employees that has low wages. So same amount of tax deposits, most likely, same amount of quarterly annual filings. You have W-2s, you have paychecks, you have all this different stuff. So it's not really that different. So when I hear people say they're too small, I'm always amazed at what they think the difference is. And I'm always like, well, what number do you think is the number in which you should outsource? They say, I don't know, 20. I'm like, why? You know, like, tell me the reason why you think you hit a certain number. From 18 employees to 20, nothing really changed in your organization much. So just always keep it in mind that a lot of small businesses need our help a little bit more so you can focus on growing your business and let us do all the fun, fun back office stuff that no one really wants to do. I mean, I don't want to. That's why I have way smarter people at my office that handle that. And I just go and talk to people. Okay. Myth number 2, it's easier to do payroll in-house. A lot of people think that, oh, it's just going to be too much of a hassle because I've got to take the data from here and get it to you. And I just have it here at my computer and I can just do it much easier, much quicker. And typically, if you look at the amount of time that you're spending, especially if you don't have an automated time system, so then you're gathering time cards and someone forgot this and I forgot to write that down, I missed that punch, and then you have people coming to you trying to change payroll last minute because they know you're sitting there doing it at your desk, and they can interrupt you and do whatever they need to, and it starts taking up your time. And then it's, okay, well, now when are those tax deposits due? I need to remember to go deposit those, and oh gosh, now the quarter's in, I need to do my unemployment filing, I need to do my 940, 941s at the end of the year, I'm doing all this stuff. Next thing you know, you've wasted, I shouldn't say waste, it's an important function, but what could you have done with that 10 hours a week or a month that could be revenue generating? If you're a person that's maybe in charge of training your people, like sometimes if you are an HR person, you're supposed to be building the culture in your organization. You're not spending the time doing that. You're just pushing paper around because you have to do it. So people who have the myth that it saves you time, not really. I think if you outsource for a few months, try it for a quarter. We have no contracts. If you hate us, leave. But I think that at the end of the quarter, you'll find how much more time you got back in your day. Outsourcing payroll is too expensive. So I love when I'll go and I'll quote someone on payroll and they're like, is that per employee? I'm like, no, that's per pay period for all your employees. They're shocked. I think a lot of people have it in their mind. If you've never received a quote for a payroll provider, you're surprised at how inexpensive it can be. Now, if you're adding on a bunch of different services, yes, it could be a little bit more expensive, but we're just talking about the payroll and tax filing. It's really not expensive. And just take the fee out of it. What people can incur in taxes in one quarter, especially a year, sometimes way more. You could have paid for 3 payroll services by the time you paid the penalties, the time you spent on the phone with the IRS or the state, and you could have just let us handle it. So I think that's probably one of my big pet peeves, is people being afraid to sit down and have a conversation because they're afraid about the cost. Also, check stock's expensive. So if you're cutting your live checks off your own check stock, it's going to be our checks. We're going to send it. And so that's just another additional savings. So I think if you really line item it and just look at it for a quarter, you'll find the savings in that itself. My data won't be secure if I outsource my payroll. I think people get nervous that they're allowing their bank account information, their employee social security numbers, their bank accounts, and sending it to another company. So like if I have it all housed here and it's under my arms, then I can protect it. And there are some payroll companies that you probably are better off just keeping it inside. But if you do your research and you're working with a reputable one, not just a Nova, we have redundancy after redundancy. We have backups. We have everything put in place to make sure that your information is secure. It's probably going to be more secure on our server than it would be the server that you have. And any data that we have of yours, it's always yours. So if you ever left us, we're always giving your information back. Employees that are terminated from your company, we can still keep that information. So if they call you and like, I need a check stub or a W-2 from 2 years ago and you're with us, we can provide that as well. So that goes back to the whole time savings of having to deal with terminated employees. We have the information that we can help get that to that employee. Okay. I'll lose all control over my payroll functions. So at the end of the day, you are in charge of your payroll. We're going to be working alongside you, but you're the one ultimately responsible to making sure that we have the information that we need. So you're thinking, well, why outsource then if I'm still doing it? Well, there are a couple of options. We have clients that say, I literally don't want to do anything. I want to do nothing. I want my employees to clock in on a timekeeping system. I want you to pull that data into your payroll system. I want you to send it through, and I'm going to see my direct deposit come into my account, and I want nothing. Send me copies of my tax returns. I'm done. Y'all take care of all of it. We absolutely can. But then the other option is that we give you your on login. It's your payroll system. It's your data. You can go in, type in your hours. All your employee information is already going to be stored in there, but you're just responsible for entering in the employee hours, hitting submit. The magic happens on the back end. So your dedicated service rep that's assigned to you, we have no 800 numbers. You're calling, let's say Debbie's your customer service rep. You're calling Debbie. Or Debbie knows when your payroll's supposed to be sent in, and she's going to be calling you if you don't send it in within a reasonable time. When Debbie gets a notification that you've submitted it, she's going to go in, make sure everything looks good. Then she's going to initiate the money movement. She's going to draft the account for direct deposits, for your taxes, and for our fee. Okay, so then once that's done, then we're sending the tax money on your behalf. We're putting the money in your employees' accounts for direct deposit. We're sending any live checks on your behalf. And then quarterly and annually, we're doing your state and federal filings, your W-2s, your 1099s, all of that. So you have access to this information wherever you are on our safe and secure server. So you can pull any reports that you need. Your accountant can have access to the system and pull any reports they need. We can create GL files. So if you are using QuickBooks or Sage or whatever you're using, so that information can go back into your accounting system so you're not having to rekey a bunch of information back and forth. And, mapping the chart of accounts is something we do every day. So people always kind of think, well, why wouldn't I keep it in just one spot? We are going to make that process a lot easier than people may think. And so it really, you don't lose control. We're just there alongside you. We become the buffer between you and the state and you and the IRS. If you received a notice in the mail, you call us. We're the ones that are going to be sitting on the phone with them, arguing with them about it. And a lot of times, the agency is the one that made the mistake. Sometimes you'll receive a letter that's not even for your company or for someone that never even worked for you. So we'll spend our hours and our dime making sure that we're taking care of that for you. And so even though you still have control, we're that just kind of that piece or that angel sitting on your shoulder making sure everything's okay. Okay. I know we are getting close to, 3 minutes over, so I'll be quick. Choosing the best payroll service provider. So where do you begin? I think other business owners should ask other business owners. People in your community, people that you trust, ask them what they do. And you may be surprised that they may outsource to a number of companies, or they may be doing it themselves and can share a little bit of, good or bad news on what their experience has been doing it themselves. Ask your CPA. Obviously we work with them very closely, but they would rather see you use a reputable payroll company than do it yourself, whether it's us or someone else. And when I'm meeting with people, I always say, I'm going to find out a lot about you, and then I'm going to tell you about us. And if it's a great fit, then awesome. Then you'll be our client and we'll take care of you. But if you choose not to go with us, please go with a different payroll provider. And I'll give them several names. I'm sure Inova loves I'm saying this. But I'd rather know that that person is getting taken care of, even if it's not by us, than know what they're probably going to go through down the road if they're handling these type functions themselves. So, like I said, ask other business owners, ask your CPA, look online, look at reviews, what other people are saying. Now, a lot of times people only post the things they don't like, but a lot of times people will come and post some good things about companies. So once you've done that research, you start narrowing it down. What are the services that are most important to you? Is the company bonded and insured? There are a lot of payroll companies out there that, I think like you were saying, that take your tax money, but then the IRS is saying we never got it. So you want to make sure that you're working with a provider that is responsible for your taxes. Obviously, I put choose Inova at the very end, but that's optional, but we hope you do. But there are just a lot of questions you can ask, and we have a blog post that is about choosing the best payroll provider. And the questions don't lead you to us. The questions lead you to figure out what the best fit is for you. So please definitely check out our blog at inovapayroll.com and look at all those different things as a little checklist if you're considering doing something different that you're currently doing today. I won't read through all of these. But that's really all I've got. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
With the payroll provider, do you guys take care of mileage if we're paying like a per mile fee to any of our employees?
Yes. So any type of earnings or deductions or anything like that you have, we will set that up in the payroll system. If it's something that's reoccurring that's always the same amount, then each payroll that would just be deducted. If it's something that's different per week or per pay period, then you would just enter in, or we would enter in whatever that is each time.
And then I know I'm getting to the place of this, but vacation and sick time, like I know like I've been in big corporations, on like your pay stub, it's tracking your vacation time in that. Is that something that you do as well, like by
Yes.
a certain percentage or number that they're earning each week? Okay.
Yes. So whether you have, some people do a full bucket that's PTO, right? Whether it's sick or vacation, it comes out of this bucket. Some people have broken up sick or vacation. Some people accrue it. Some people give people a flat amount each year. Maybe it rolls over, maybe it doesn't. So we'll make sure that we get a copy of your PTO, your vacation and sick policy. And then based on those rules, we'll set it up in the system so that it automatically knows to add those accrual rates to that employee. If you enter in 8 payroll hours, then it knows to deduct that from their balance. And so when they're reviewing their check stubs and things like that, they automatically know this is how much I've earned, this is how much I've used, this is my balance, and things like that. So if they're sitting at home with their wife or their husband trying to plan a trip, they can just, log on and look at their check stub and know where they are instead of having to bug you, or someone else during the day. It just gives them more access to information.
Okay, 2 more questions. Do you have, like right now, my employees are logging in on an app on their phone that has GPS tracking. Is there some type of time clock app that's linked to your company or something that you would suggest?
So I answer that in 2 ways.
Okay.
If you like what you're doing and it's working, then if that, whatever you're using, can create a CSV file, and we'll tell you what the headings need to look like, then we can actually upload that into our payroll software. If you want to look at what we have to offer, then we have something similar that would track, either where they were, or you can put parameters that won't let them clock in until they reach a certain threshold. If they're working at one site and they move to another, they can change that. They can also have time clocks that are biometric, which helps out with buddy punching, because you're not going to take your buddy's thumb and be able to put it on there if you're not there. So that always helps. So there's different options, but yes, it can just funnel straight into payroll.
Okay, and going back to mileage, do you think just for the IRS and for tracking that you need to be having like a like Mile IQ or something on the employee's phone? Or like right now, I completely trust the employees that I have, like it's kind of family, and so I trust, and if I'm losing a little bit of money from miscalculation, but do you think that I'm needing to have written record of that, or just their mile turn in is okay as far as my accountability to the IRS?
What I would say, it's always good to have something that is date. It's the stamp that says this is the date in which I drove from here to here. This is how many miles. It also goes back to something you may be thinking about, if something happened that day where they clocked in that I'm driving for the company, you have record of they were or they weren't. And so we always suggest using a system like that.
Okay. All right. I forgot my last question.
Well, my card is in the folder, the NEMA folder, if you want to reach out at any
Yeah,
point.
I will comment from the IRS perspective on the mileage. You definitely need some kind of record showing the date and the mileage and where they went and the business purpose of that. I can tell you if you get audited by the IRS and you're asked to substantiate those business miles, you must have some kind of contemporaneous record like that, whether it's an app or a paper document saying where you went on those dates, how much mileage there was, and all that kind of thing. Does not have to be GPS tracking, no.
So, yeah. So in the folder, there's a flyer that says Express Payroll, and that is our small business payroll package, and that's geared to companies with 1 to 10 employees. And that's regardless of pay frequency. So you could run payroll weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and it doesn't change your price. So especially if you're a weekly payroll, most traditional payroll companies, or even our traditional pricing, will charge you every time you process payroll. But with this express package, you can process as many times as you need, and your price is not going to go up. And it's just a flat $95 a month. So, comparatively speaking, $95 a month is chump change compared to what you'd be paying, in penalties, or having a staff fully dedicated to making sure that they were doing our quarterly annual filings, tax deposits. So it's $95 a month. It's $10 per quarter. That's not per employee. That's just $10 a quarter for the quarterly return. So it's $40 a year. And it's $5 at year end for each W-2 or 1099 that we cut.
Would I get a bulk discount on those preparations? I mean, I'm talking about probably around 500 W-9s.
Yes, so we wouldn't put you on our express package. So, but we would, the actual per W-2 rate, you and I could talk, would be lower than the $5.
No,
I'm not going to quote what that number would be as I'm being recorded.
For 1099 employees.
So so on the express package, it's still $5, but for 1099s or W-2s, then we would just charge you per 1099 or W-2. There would be a base fee to create the file. Do you have any W-2 employees throughout the year? Or are they all? You have 3? Okay. So then we would not do your 1099s if we weren't also doing your payroll. So if we were handling your payroll, your 1099s, you could either give us a total at the end of the year to cut the 1099, or each month or however often you're paying them, just give us that total and we'd enter into the system. So for reporting purposes, you'd have record of it the entire year and we would know at the end of the year how much to be cutting that for. I can definitely give you pricing for that.
I'll just add a comment that of all the areas in accounting, payroll is where we see the most mistakes. It's because it's so complex. I mean, as you went through your list of most common mistakes, I was identifying with every one of those you mentioned. It's that area where we see clients making the most mistakes. But you think about it, you have to file 4 quarterly returns, federal returns, 4 state returns, then you have to file all the W-2s and things at the end of the year. Compare that to your income tax return. How often do you file that? Once a year. So the more returns that you're filing, the more complex the calculations, the more chance there is for error. So payroll is probably one of the highest risk areas in accounting, just because there's so many complex calculations and so many different returns that you're filing. It just increases the risk of making mistakes. So using a company like Inova, I mean, honestly, we don't even do our own payroll. Can you believe that, an accounting firm? Because it's more efficient for these guys to do it for us than for us to invest that time. What's our time better spent doing? Helping our clients than dealing with all those details. So they have a service that handles all the things that we need, and that's the one thing your company does, and you do it very well. So we find it very beneficial to us to outsource that and get that done, not only for our firm but for our clients as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me come today, and thank you for Stoner and Henry for having us. And my card is in the Inova folder, so if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Okay. Just remind you, in your folders, there is a blue sheet that we would appreciate you just taking 1 minute to fill that out. Give us some feedback on what was helpful, maybe some things we could do differently, just a quick evaluation. But thank you again so much for coming. We'll be standing around for a few minutes here afterward if you want to come up individually, ask any questions about something. But thank you for coming and have a great day.